a cavalcade of writers who dazzle with their wit, a mighty throng of seamen, awash with God and grit, the poets and the artists who venerate these shores, the tourists in their flip-flops, track sand into the stores, disciples of St. Peter, who worship by the sea, the wise Sicilian nonnas, reciting rosary, descendants of the English, the Finns and Portuguese, who greet each other daily and coexist in peace, the wealthy in their mansions, along a scenic drive, the minimum wage workers who struggle to survive, and don't forget the first ones, to walk these storied hills. Their whispers linger in the wind, their drumbeats echo still.
Tuossa jännin mä kohtasin. Halo Möhki, Möhki, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Möhki, Möhki, oho.
All right. Once again, we're happy to introduce ourselves and say to you, we're the Gloucester Bookies, another adventure with books. Reading books, writing books, illustrating books, doing anything you do with books. And I am joined today, happily, by George Rosen and Susanna Natty. And we've got, look at the pile of books in front of her.
Don't get scared.
And I understand she'll introduce why certain Moomin cups. Will be a very interesting story in that. Anyway, and we'll start with, if I may, the oddity that I have asked Susanna to tell us about Finns on Cape Ann and writing, either related to Finns or related to Finns who are writers, and whether it's set in Finland or not. And boy, she got up a pile of stuff here to show, which even surprised me how much there was, because I'm always thinking there might be one or two books, and there's much more than that. So please, if you don't mind, George, I'll start off with Susanna and sort of Finns and books. You go right ahead. Or you could start with the Moomin cups.
I will. I'll work them in somehow. But I took Wayne's assignment very seriously, and I thought, okay, Finns who write. I know there are some Finnish writers. So I consulted the trusty internet, although some of these writers I had already known about. And I'll start with Tove Jansson.
Spell that or say it slowly.
Tove, T-O-V-E, Jansson, Jansson.
And I'll say, that doesn't sound Finnish, but you'll explain.
It's Swedish, but she's a Swedish-speaking Finn.
Yes,
so she is Finnish. And she primarily focused on writing books for children. And her characters are so beloved that not only is there a Moomin world in Finland, it's an amusement park of the most charming kind. It's so uncommercial and so unsplashy and just filled with these wonderful characters that she's created. And there's a lot of merch, too. There is a lot of Moomin merch. George has got a mug, too. These are Moomin mugs. My family says I have too many mugs, but for me, this is one of those things that I cannot have too many of these mugs. And they're all these wonderful characters that have got these great names like Snufkin, Moomin Papa, Moomin Mama, Little Mai, Grok, Snork Maiden. That's another wonderful one. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this book called Who Will Comfort Toffel?
Which means it's been translated, so folks who want to say, I'd like to get into it, but after all, it's only in Finnish. No.
This is in English.
Right.
It's been translated into 33 different languages, and it's never been out of print since it was published in 1960-something. 1960-something, yes. But anyway, this story shows how masterfully she sort of gets into what a child is feeling. And she does this thing where, isn't there some kind of mantra about writing, which is don't tell, show, or something like that?
That kind of thing, yes.
Yeah. So she's very much that way. Toffel is a very shy, introverted little creature who has got no confidence and is very lonely, suffers loneliness both by himself and with people. He just doesn't have any confidence at all. And Tove takes him through these adventures, his lonely adventures, I have to say, until he finds a bottle in the ocean that has a message in it from somebody even lonelier than he is. Oh. And that suddenly turns everything around, because suddenly he's no longer thinking about his own aloneness and his own fear and his own security about feeling on the outside, being the outsider all the time, because he's now got a mission to help somebody else. So it has a happily ever after ending, but it speaks to all those fears that we have and that children have about, how do I approach this group of people? I feel like, oh, how can they possibly like me? It's a wonderful book.
Does he ever find the other person?
Yes. Through great adventures. And the illustrations are done in black and white ink, and these wonderful splashy colors. This is very typical of Tove Jansson. There's a lot of words, but I think they're well worth reading. Whether you're reading in Finnish, English, Japanese, Danish, I have no idea what languages it were.
If I'm following you in that line, parents or grandparents who want to read something aloud to their kids or grandkids will gravitate toward this series of books. It's not just one book, right? There's 2 or 3 or 5.
She has a number of books with these characters, right. Yes.
But it's more of that than probably even the kid can read themselves. Yes.
And interestingly, I find that for kids nowadays who have been sort of slowly had their attention span reduced, this may be a little wordy. But I think, a smart parent or grandparent or whoever is reading to a child can pick out the really important parts and paraphrase others. It sounds
like an ideal read-aloud book that you can go at the pace of the kid.
Absolutely, yes.
And also has, stop or pause with a question back and forth. And
yes.
Do you ever feel that way? Stuff like that?
Yeah.
And they can express where they otherwise might not be able to come out with the words. Good for you.
Good.
Right.
So that is one of the books I brought in. And then...
and you've got to realize, those who are Finns or used to being around Finns, isn't it amazing that a Finn would come out with a book at all and speak aloud? Just wonderful. Go right ahead.
Well, that segues right into the next book I want to speak about, which is...
The Quiet Finn.
The Quiet Finns. This book was actually written quite a while ago. It was written in 1938-39, I guess 1939, because the author, Sillanpää, won the Nobel Prize in Literature for this book. I read it a while back. I was inspired to read it because I ran across a clipping of a review that Tim Krause had written. He wrote Boys on the Bus, is known for that. And he mentions Sillanpää and about how much he admired his writing. So I thought, well, I must pick this book up. And I had to question, after I read this, I could throw this question out to everybody here. Are there different ethnicities, different groups of people who have a particular sensibility about how they write? And with Sillanpää, I felt very much like this was a Finn writing this book. there's a great joke about Finns. You know, you could tell an extroverted Finn when he looks at your shoes instead of his shoes when you're introduced. But this is in a way like that, because the plot takes this young woman who is born into a family suffers a lot of tragedy by the age of 12. She's orphaned. She has to go become a maid. She gets caught up with the background of the Finnish Civil War going on in 1918. So there's all this stuff going on that is happening to her. And the way that Sillanpää talks about her life, it's sort of a recitation of the scenes and the things that are happening to her, but not a lot of exploration of her inner workings. Instead, you pick those up by what's happening. It's so subtle. It's so out there. It's so let me show you everything. It's like, you need to get into this. And because I read a review just before I came in, sort of refreshing my memory about this, and I'm going to quote shamelessly from it. It was someone who actually had been inspired to read The Maid Celia by that same review by Tim Krause. And this person wrote that the plot isn't the star. Sillanpää's writing is deceptively simple. It's true. His sentences are just simple and declarative, but they build and build and build. And I found that I couldn't find a passage to read out loud in here, because selecting a passage from it, it doesn't work without the context of the rest of the book, because it's just very quietly building things. And as I was reading, and I was thinking, I'm not sure how grabbed I am by this, but yet I was, because I kept on reading it. And at the end, I felt like I had been through kind of a journey and had an appreciation for his writing, but also for the picture it gave me of Finland during that time, of changing from a rural society to a sort of capitalist society, and the Civil War going on, and the hardships and the deprivations visited on people. I thought on that alone, it was worth a look.
Well, you remind me of a true story that when I went over to Finland around 1969, it was 30 years after the War of 39, where they had the Russians and the Finns had been fighting. I met a veteran of that war. And I wanted to compliment the Finns accurately, and I mentioned, I didn't know too many famous Finns, but I said, this man, Sillanpää. Well, I said, you have, famous writer, Finnish writer, Sillanpää. And he made a frown. and he said, yeah, that's Swede. Sillanpää was not a Swede. However, and you mentioned the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
When you're awarded the Nobel Prize, you get a trip and everything to Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah.
Oh, it happened by chance that when he was awarded the Nobel Prize, the war broke out. And he didn't come back to Finland, which was very controversial among the veterans,
I'll bet.
who were saying, that son of a gun sat the war out in neutral Sweden instead of coming back to Finland and joining the fight. So when I said the Finn, I couldn't have picked a word.
That's right.
That's so funny.
The famous Finnish, yeah, that's Swede. So you were impressed by that Swede. But anyway.
Well, and I hadn't even made the connection with 1939, of course.
Right. It was the
my
Nobel.
gosh.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway,
So then.
Now you got less controversial Finns in it.
Right. Then I picked up this book by Väinö Linna.
Oh my God, the great one.
Do you know this one?
Väinö Linna. Absolutely. You tell about what you...
Unknown Soldiers. This one, for me, was a little bit more of a slog. But it was very interesting. It was written about a troop of soldiers during the Continuation War, which ran for 3 years. from like 1940 to 43 or something like that, or 39 to 42. It doesn't really matter, but back then.
44 to 45. Yeah.
And it's very gritty and sweaty and unpleasant. And if you based the Finns' sort of military prowess on this book, you would think, how the heck did they get anything done? Because this is such a ragtag bunch of people. But it really is an anti-war book in a lot of ways. It's
right,
behind the scenes. And I do have one passage to read from here, because at one point, to encourage the men, some commandant from high up comes in and gives everybody awards. And so they're let's see. Oh, yes. Names followed. He's passing the awards out. The officers received Liberty Crosses, and the NCOs and privates got Liberty Medals. Each man went up to receive his decoration from the hands of the colonel, along with congratulations. Some of them took their time walking up, soaking up every last minute in the limelight, but most scurried up and back at a sort of half-run, as if embarrassed to be receiving a prize for something they didn't realize they had done. They could not have been more Finnish in the disparaging attitude they all took toward the proceedings. Bad word, little trinkets. Beep.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. Believe it or not, Unknown Soldier by Väinö Linna, which is has from the beginning, when it was first published, an enormous following in Finland. And when it was translated in the United States of America, we were reading it too as a great anti-war book.
Yes.
And it basically, however, did not take anything away from the bravery or the reality of raw fighting by the Finns for survival against a much larger, they were the underdogs in this war. And the Russian Red Army was much better, bigger. And the Unknown Soldier is basically trying to bring details to these unknown heroes. And when you get the close-up view, you're surprised by it, because it's ordinary folks.
It is very ordinary folks.
And they really never were intended to be military, and they would never join it by choice. But they feel that their country's life is on the line. And by the end of it, I don't know about you, but at the very end of it, when some people are falling dead that you've lived with and talked, they've talked in front of you in this book, and they're dying, the tears start falling.
They're in retreat.
They're representative and truly of that generation that it made the great sacrifice. The greatest generation for them. Yes.
Yeah. It was, you're exactly right. You're really seeing this from the very close-up view they have without an overview, and their individual lives, and the ones who are afraid of being afraid and then find the courage within them somehow, and the others who react differently. I mean, it's every sort of human reaction you can have to what's going on around them. It's a terrific book.
And you may not know, it's been made into a movie. But you have to accept, people that like this or don't, subtitles. You have to accept subtitles, because the movie's in Finnish and the subtitles there. And I recall one scene from that movie, which may be in the book or not, I'm not sure, is everybody seems to be representative of a typical Finn of various, and one of the typical Finns, 10%, 20% of the population or something, is very, very religious, pious, and Bible reading and all that. And he's in there, in the movie, but it's not that everyone, the 80% wants to hear it. So, of course, one soldier gets really distressed and disturbed and stressed, burned out, I guess you call, from the war, and he just, for a moment at least, he's going to pause from all these battles. He goes over toward the river and he sits down by himself, and he's looking into the river flowing by, and he's feeling his depressed thoughts silently, and he's finally got a moment of repose or something. And of course, this character comes in and says, I know what you need. It is more of Jesus. The guy's silent because Finns are silent. They're not. He doesn't repulse the other guy.
Yeah.
You know, you tolerate certain, especially in wartime, your buddies. But this character goes on about
Such a moment.
he was a man of sorrows as well. Not me. It's in the movie. It's wonderful. And so if you see the movie, either Unknown Soldier or if you get this book, people recommend it, including Susanna and me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Good. Okay, so then the next one I picked up is a contemporary novel by Riikka Pulkkinen. And this one is much more in the vein of a novel you could pick up written by an American and English person. It wasn't characterized by any kind of Finnish sensibility, but it's a great read. It's a sort of a psychological novel. A couple is an elderly couple is facing the imminent death of the wife, and their granddaughter is helping the grandmother and finds a dress in a closet, which leads to a lot of questions. As it turns out, there had been a long affair that the grandfather had early in the marriage, and it's all about the fallout from that and all the psychological comings and goings of it. And I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. But I'll get back to the sort of Finnish sensibility idea here with the last book I want to talk about, which is The Year of the Hare, Hare, by Arto Paasilinna. And it is, it's a funny book. It's a picaresque novel. I pulled that phrase out of my head from Miss Cohen's English class back in 7th grade. What was it? The classic picaresque novel was Candide, I think, where people get into these, sort of adventures being visited upon them in all sorts of ways. So this story is about a journalist who is in a car with his photographer, and somehow a rabbit jumps out in the middle of the road and the car hits it. And the journalist says, whoa, 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 stop. And he leaps out because he wants to see if the hare is okay. And that's the point at which his life takes a complete turn. He somehow decides in that split second that he's going to go off in the woods with this hare and somehow, take care of it and leave his life as a journalist, which he didn't really love that much, leave his wife, who his view of her is that she's pretty much a shrew. And so he's just going to walk away from his life.
As many Finnish wives are. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, that will be another discussion. And so this story is his year with this rabbit, and the rabbit actually doesn't play a big part in it. The rabbit really is a prop, where some people come in ooh and ah, and there are some sort of plot pieces of the plot that are advanced by the rabbit because he's in touch with a veterinarian, and then a special veterinarian in Helsinki who needs to take blood tests and all sorts of stuff.
So this is not a momentary injury and a very quick recovery.
The hair is pretty good after, like maybe a couple of weeks, but they stick together.
I see. Okay, they've been through a lot.
So the journalist goes off on these adventures and ends up being, in a fishing cabin with some guy he hasn't met, and then somehow there's news of a big forest fire, and they decide they're going to go off together and fight it, and then he ends up leaving the forest fire at some point and ends up in a place where he's taking care of a lodge, and then there are some people doing military maneuvers. There's all sorts of weird stuff going on where the one thing is more ridiculous than the last. So I'll read you one. I really couldn't almost choose a passage in this. So this is where he has just been dropped by helicopter into a place where he can help fight the fire. Suddenly, He's by a lake. Suddenly he saw something by the thick grass on the riverbank. He's by a river, sorry. A man's hand, hairy and sunburned. It stretched out of the grass and rested in the water up to the elbow. Vatanen was shocked. It looked as if the hand belonged to a corpse. He swam up to it and took hold of it. It was not unattached. It belonged to a large man lying back in the riverbank bushes with his mouth open. Vatanen got out of the water and bent down over the prone figure. He felt the pulse. It was beating normally. He put his face close to the man's mouth to see if he was breathing, and a foul reek of alcohol met him. Vatanen shook the man, who slowly began to come to. He turned onto his back and stared at Vatanen a moment, as if trying to recognize him. Then he offered his hand. "Salo Sensari, who are you?" "Vatanen." After they'd shaken hands, Vatanen helped the other man to his feet. "Listen, you're looking at the man who's been dealt the world's worst hand." This is the corpse. He went on to explain. For his vacation...
This is originally in English, by the way. That's a question.
No, this is in Finnish first.
Oh, it's in Finnish. Oh, so they dealt the worst hand is probably not hand.
That's right. It would be, actually, I've forgotten the word for hand. You may know.
Cassie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you. So he went on to explain. Sorry, I keep on moving this table. For his vacation,
It's got wheels.
he decided to spend a couple of weeks fishing and also brewing a little moonshine in a quiet spot where he could be absolutely sure not to be disturbed. So he slipped off into the wild with all his tackle and set up his modest still. Then just as the first 10 liters are cooked, what happens? A forest fire that incinerates his still. So he has to flee on foot with the fire after him and a 10-liter vat of hooch on his back. And now here he is. His knapsack and victuals are up in flames. Everything's kaput. Fishing tackle, the works. All that's left is this first batch of the stuff. So here I am, parked by the river. Second day of drinking, this is. Still quite a few liters left, but talk about rotten luck. That is the tone of this book.
Yes.
And there was a point, maybe 90% of the way through, where I was finding it all a little bit baffling. And then the last chapter pulls it together in the most wonderful way. And I cannot offer even a spoiler because at that point I was laughing too hard. So that is my review.
Terrific. Thank you for
And
that.
it has, rather than an author's picture, there's the rabbit's picture, right?
Well, there's an illustration with a, on the back. That's right. Forget
You got to
the
make
author.
your choices.
Forget the author. It's the rabbit, the hare. Okay.
I wonderful selections. I'm going to ask the indulgence of the audience. We're going to do something a little different now with Susanna, who has taken part in what I think is one of the more remarkable imaginative events of Lanesville in decades, and that was the so-called paupers' graves.
Yes.
That were, if you go down, is it called the Seaside Cemetery?
The Seaside Cemetery in Lanesville.
Seaside Cemetery.
Yes.
If you go, as you first come into the Seaside Cemetery, on the left-hand side, there's rows and rows of graves. These graves, in many instances, are people of minimal means, and in part, I guess, were given free burial and so on. Sometimes it was immigrants. Many of the names on a recently carved stone on behalf of everybody, many of the names are recognizably Finnish names. And as an event, I don't know who sponsored it. Susanna?
Sharon Cohen.
Sharon Perry Cohen.
Yes.
This is her creation.
Yes.
And it was quite a remarkable thing. And she worked with reenactors or intended people. If there was somebody buried
No, they were
there
actually dead.
who were dead,
No,
the actual...
No, they were the actual dead people. No,
You'll remember that you were there.
I was struck by
In fact, in the form of a, there's a play, I think, is it Our Town, where the dead on the hill are speaking with each other and stuff like that. Yeah. It's really come to life in that play. The people who were buried there selectively were able to be trained. You trained in this thing.
Right.
Be trained in the life of the person they were reenacting, resembling, reflecting on. And again, in many cases, it was a Finnish person. In your case, it was a woman. Give her name.
Her name was Sanna Talvitie.
Sanna, which sometimes in English we say Sarah, but Sanna Talvitie, and actually that has a interpretation as well. In English, you'd say Winter Road.
Winter Road, Talvitie.
So Talvi is winter and Tia is road. But Sanna Talvitie was a Finnish immigrant, born in Finland, raised in Finland, and then at some age, you tell me better, you studied her biography.
I did.
It was
She had quite the story, and first, all thanks to Sharon Cohen for what she did organizing that event. It was just extraordinary.
Well, let me reenact this in the way that you did, because all of you who took part in this,
we took on the characters.
Presented yourselves in character to anyone public who was present.
People could come and ask us questions.
People could come up and ask you questions. You typically would have answers for them that were based on the information you knew of the very people that were buried there, and, if you will, quote, came alive. They came alive through you. And in Sanna's case, I'm going to do this live on 5 here. What is your name? You just
okay. So you're going to have to pardon my reenactment of the Finnish accents I heard growing up. So I'm going to do my best. And the other thing I'll say is that this is a really fun exercise, but as I was doing the research on this, I really came to feel very close to this person and wanted to honor her for the life she had.
I think we came to, anybody, even the people who were visiting, let alone the people who were reenacting, came to feel identified with these people in a way that you wouldn't if you're merely walking by a stone or see a name. What is your name?
My name is Sanna Talvitie.
And is it Mrs. Talvitie?
Oh, yeah. I came from Finland in 1913.
Yes.
My husband Jaakko was already here.
And
We had, in Finland, we had 3 children when he left. We had a 4th one after he left. I was with a newborn baby and our 3 children for 8 years before I joined him. It was a long time.
So you were 8 years away. You were in Finland with the kids, and he was in this country trying to do what?
He was, like with a lot of other Finns who left Finland, looking for work.
All right. Did he work in the quarries?
Yeah.
And once he had sufficient money, he brought you and the kids over?
Yeah.
All right. And you lived in Lanesville?
I lived in Bayview.
Bayview. And you were in Bayview at a time when I guess the quarries they had a railroad to the Hodgkins Cove.
Yep.
And you had to watch the kids that they didn't go on the track.
Oh yeah, they were old enough to take care. But we had 2 more children after
in this country.
I came. Yeah, one very quickly after we arrived.
Yes.
9 months later.
Yes.
And that was Oiva, who died young, 2 years old. But the other one was good.
Many times kids in those days did not live long. And then you had 4 from Finland, and then 1 who survived in this.
Yep.
And at a time, let's see, you came 1913. Within 5 years, there was an epidemic of some kind. What was that?
Oh, that was the big influenza.
The influenza around the world.
The Spanish influenza.
1918.
And I became sick, very sick.
You became sick.
I became sick. I was in the tent city outside the hospital.
So Addison Gilbert had not only rooms, but also outside there were tents.
Many people.
And you were in the tent.
And I then died. Funny that I'm talking to you now, but this is for suspending disbelief. But one
and
other
I take
thing.
it you were buried.
I was but we had very little money, so I was in that grave where there were many other people.
Yes.
At
Seaside Cemetery.
Seaside Cemetery. One very important thing for you to know about my husband Jaco was he was a good socialist.
Yes.
Yes, he was a proud man. Very good
in
man.
Lanesville.
Yeah.
You must have both then, and maybe with the kids, attended those socialist meetings at the Socialist Hall on Tucker Street.
Yep.
You were familiar with that.
Yep.
And then they have dances and also concerts, and they didn't have church services.
Yeah, no.
Their thing
I had
was-
heard from Finn, who was related to someone you may have heard of named Susanna Natty, and her father told me about the competing bands of the Red Finns and the White Finns. The White Finns were the church-going Lutheran Finns, and the Red Finns were the socialist Finns, and they had separate lodges, and they also had separate bands. So,
and who was the best band? It reminds me of that scene where they're in the Casablanca, where they're singing the Marseillaise and the Watch on the Rhine or something of Fatherland. Yeah.
Battle of the Bands.
The Battle of the Bands.
Battle of the Bands.
That one. Sanna, thank you for the window on
Kiitos.
that time period.
Good.
Of immigrants from Finland and Lanesville, which were many. And that's something that you can follow up on, because Seaside Cemetery, there's Sanna Dalvetia's grave.
That's right. You'll find her name there.
Yes.
Yes.
On the stone.
And, yep.
I just had a couple things. In fact, the first one I want to rise to the occasion. I'm just going to look over.
Oh, you are literally going to rise to the occasion.
Literally. And
Okay, just don't snag yourself.
I never do this.
I'm watching this wire.
I know. I never do this, but we're going to try. Some of you out in the audience may be veterans. Some of you may be in the situation we talked about earlier, where you're in a degree of depression. Something's happened and it's been traumatic. Usually experiences of the past, but it can be even something happening here and now. And it drives you crazy to stress, and you even question your existence. Why were you born? If you can undo that and don't do. So I'm asking you to, inviting you to say, help is on the way. Not only in a clinic or a way, there's free in the shelves of the Sawyer Free Library. There's a book by Leo Tolstoy, who was a veteran also of war, and got to a point, he wrote this it's called in English a confession, and it's a very short book. I think, I'm just looking at the pages, it's 79 pages, and it's his candid review of a time when he was very depressed, even to the point of wondering whether it was time to cash in or already lived everything he wanted to live, and there's nothing ahead of him that was any better. This is a guy with great achievements and great talents, as you know. Well, he eventually worked it out himself with his, and he reviews his thought process in a written form that anybody can follow, literally follow, and almost like a formula to go along in this journey with him toward reclaiming an interest in life. And I thought that would be something that sometimes, every now and then, somebody needs a boost and wants to read something uplifting like that can reach you at any time of life, even in time of a despair or depression. So this is called A Confession by Leo Tolstoy. And again, I recommend it highly because it can be life-saving, perhaps.
Good.
So we'll go from that.
Great recommendation, Wayne.
I hope it will work for somebody.
And you need to stand for it.
It is.
I can't stand it.
That's all right.
Yeah, anyway.
It could be it's a mark of respect.
Yes.
All right. The other book I brought, it had nothing to do with Finns, but has to do more with the Arabs originally. You've got to imagine there was a group of, I think, 2 or 3 Arabs on camels in the desert where there was nothing otherwise, and they were looking around for something that they might be able to sell in their degree of poverty. And I'm just going to read the little introduction here before I get into the title and everything else about the book. They were riding their camels near a huge cliff that flanks the Nile River, not far from the modern city of Nag Hammadi. And some of you out there already know, as soon as you hear the word Nag Hammadi, oh, the Nag Hammadi scrolls. Well, that's the story right here. They were looking for sabak. Now, believe it or not, what's sabak? You don't know what sabak is. You're looking for sabak. I didn't either, I can tell you. A natural fertilizer that accumulates in the area.
Oh.
So they hobbled their camels at the foot of the cliff, and they began to dig around a large boulder, basically to see if they can get some of this sabak.
Excuse me.
Much to their surprise, instead, they uncovered a large storage jar with a bowl sealed on the top. And this one of them, named Muhammad Ali hesitated before opening the sealed jar. And George, you know why. Why he wouldn't open this jar immediately.
Oh, well, you told me because there was going to be a curse coming out of it.
He's worried about a curse. Apparently he feared that the jar could contain a jinn or a spirit that might be released to haunt him and do mischief. I mean, this is...
Or win an Academy Award.
Or win an Academy
Award. Good things have happened
if you get
from
it
released jinns and genies.
Two wishes. Yet he also reflected upon the legends concerning treasures hidden in the area, and his love of gold overcame his fear of jinns. So he smashed the jar with his mattock, the digging tool for this fertilizer, and as he has explained it, a golden substance flew out of the jar and disappeared into the air, which the author concludes was probably neither gin nor gold, but papyrus fragments, because of some pressure, and it shot some fragments of papyrus into the air that were golden in color. At least they glistened in the sunlight. So that was the start of it. When they took the rest of the jar, it had 13 papyrus books that's now known as the Nag Hammadi scrolls, or the Nag Hammadi library, including, and now I'll tell you the title of this short book, one of these scrolls, which is the Gospel of Thomas.
Oh my goodness.
Did you hear of the Gospel of Thomas?
This sounds familiar.
Well,
But is it one of the Apocrypha, or is it a...
Well, Apocrypha, because it never was around.
Yeah.
It was suppressed, burned, destroyed,
Right.
torn up by anybody that could ever get a hold of it, except the people who put this in a jar that retained its secret for almost 2,000 years. The Gospel of Thomas should have been, probably in some worlds, it would have been Matthew, Mark, Luke, John,
And Thomas?
and Thomas, but it wasn't. And Thomas would have been the unusual gospel, different from the other four. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are very narrative.
Mm-hmm.
They go from the beginning of birth and then into the death and then the resurrection. The Gospel of Thomas is more the just the facts, ma'am. And like a Jack Webb might be writing a
Sort of like bullet points?
No, bullet points on a notebook, a stenographer's thing, where wow, that was a great line by Jesus, and they write down Jesus said whatever. So it's also popularly known as a sayings gospel, because instead of a story or a narrative, it's various sayings, collected, not necessarily closely related, but just here and there all along the path. And the reason I recommend it to anybody to read is it's a very short read. although this claims to be, I'm going to say claims to be, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
This claims to be a page, this claims to be a 65-page book, right? But what you can tell even at that distance, this is page 65.
Yeah.
Next to it is not in English. It's in ancient Egyptian Coptic, if you can read ancient. In other words, it's a 30-page read.
So they
with-
show
with
the language and then the translation.
the language and the translation.
bilingual.
So if anybody's doubtful of the translation in English, they can make their own translation by quickly checking across in Coptic and say, that's not exactly right. In Coptic, actually, that is a more ambiguous word, if you know Coptic. I don't know.
So where did you find this book? Was it in the library or where?
This was through the library, because although it's not in the shelf at Sawyer Free Library, they will get it for you. You can ask for it. This one particularly came from Gordon College, which might have institutional reasons they want to keep it on the shelf. But the wonderful thing, again, is that it's the Gospel of Thomas. And I look to George to tell us a little more about, see, Thomas claims to be a disciple who actually actively accompanied and went along with the others and with Jesus. George can tell us more even than I knew about this Thomas.
About Thomas himself. When you're talking about there's this phrase about the synoptic gospels, which do not include John. John is a later, not much later, given our times now, but whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke were there, and
Matthew, Mark,
Thomas was there too,
Right.
So he's a witness. But he has two claims to fame, one of which is just in everybody's popular culture. He's doubting Thomas. He's the one who is skeptical of the resurrection, and then comes to accept the fact that it actually occurred. The other thing is, which I only learned when I visited India, is Thomas is the patron saint of India. I mean, who would have thought that India would even have a patron saint? And supposedly in AD 52, he crossed the Indian Ocean, went to the area of India which is now called Kerala in southwestern India, and the cities of Cochin, which is no longer called Cochin, and proselytized there and started a Christian community which still is in existence today. In fact, Kerala is, as a state of India, is about half Christian. It's also wildly the most literate, just in the basic terms of literacy, of people who are able to read and write in India. And so there are churches which he established, supposedly, in southwestern India and also in southeastern India, where he moved to. There's also, at the same time, there was a Jewish community starting. So there is a Jewish synagogue which goes back 2,000 years, again in Cochin. And I'm calling it Cochin because I'm forgetting what the name, the new name of it is. And he died, was martyred in India near what used to be Madras and is now Chennai. You can find in various churches in India the spear with which he was killed, and also various body parts scattered about in the way. But he's extraordinarily important in bringing, exporting Christianity out of the Middle East region, and in the first century of after Jesus' existence. So he's a kind of remarkable figure. Now I don't, these were newly discovered, as you say, after 2,000 years, and I don't know how much of if there are doctrinal differences or various things, whether they're remarked in this folk history of Thomas in India, or whether he's just kind of just kind of a St. Patrick figure, except for India.
Intriguing to follow that up in research. Right now, for sure, the Gospel of Thomas really, in about the year 100, maybe even to the year 200, in that area, very long time ago, it was circulating. People were reading it. They were making copies. Monks were making copies and giving it to others. And the church fathers, who were more authoritative, the bishops and others, got together and said, this is not right. The Gospel of Thomas should be suppressed, should not be read by anybody, should be destroyed, and is not up to par of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's out there. So we know it existed because of the criticisms that survived. We didn't know what it said until 1945, and even a little more, because the three Arabs read it in Coptic, but we didn't have it in English.
What a find!
Later, and so that's quite a find. And I'm just saying, you can live a long time, and yet still there are surprises out there, from one thing or another.
So have you read through it? I mean, did you get any sense of why it would have been suppressed?
Yes. It really democratizes the faith. It is, if you will, it's anachronistic to say this, but it's more Protestant than it is Catholic. It isn't laying down the law of the way that the priests, go to church and so on. It's more, you can have a direct relationship with God. And you are as much divine as when
Interesting.
Anybody. And Jesus healed, but so can you. And in terms of being a Pharisee, a priest, or something separate apart, and they'll eat at their table and you'll eat it, no, everybody's going to eat together in the and these are in the sayings and in the so you say, whoa, that guy's a Democrat with a small d.
Yeah, with a small d.
And it's like, no wonder the church fathers who wanted to be a little bit more, you do this and this is the way it is, and don't have anything. In fact, don't read Thomas, because if you do, you go along that track of independence and rebellion.
Well,
so yeah.
Fascinating.
Wow.
What an hour we're having between Finnish literature and St. Thomas.
Yeah. And by the way, this
Truly,
particular
absolutely related.
This particular edition, which I think is the common one.
Well, I mean, of course, William Blake wrote about those feet trotting on England, and he may have gone to Finland too. So there may
this could be the connection. Full circle. Full circle.
The whole Finnish Indian kind of alternative tracking of early Christianity. So,
if anybody's intrigued by scholars in Shakespeare and other literature, this is literature, because I know it says there at the end of the book there is a nice 10 or 15 page interpretation by Harold Bloom. So Harold Bloom. Some people who study Shakespeare would say that he died only a few years ago. Would say the top scholar in the United States of Shakespeare was Harold Bloom, and now he's spending time and interpreting and working with the Gospel of Thomas. Must be a literary gem for him to spend time and put his name on this book too. So Harold Bloom's forget that we recommend. Harold Bloom recommends this book, The Gospel of Thomas, and it's 2,000 years in the making.
Wait, I never know what is going to happen in this hour, and that is fascinating.
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. And isn't this the year of the hare?
Is it?
Is it?
Well, also, I mean, if you call something the year of the hare, what you're the first reaction of someone. It's going to be about Chinese stuff because the year of the hare is
sure.
one of the
one of the
years
yes.
in the cycle of calendars.
Yeah.
And all those kind of things.
If you will.
So from start to finish, I just had to get that
Oh.
We've dealt with a great deal of different subjects.
But what about the relationship between Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, the White Rabbit, and Going Down the Rabbit Hole, and the Year of the Hare?
I think this stands firmly in the tradition.
Yes. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Well, we've had a good and fortunate and lucky
It will appear
hour.
in the collection entitled "The Best of Bunny."
Best of Bunny.
Yes.
The best of Bunny.
All right. I can do it. We've had a nice, lovely time, and we will be back again with the Gloucester Bookies. But in the meantime, please write and read. And what is it right now? Your profound remark at the end.
A profound remark at the end? I can't think that fast.
No, and there are only
All right.
4 seconds left. So
We did it.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you. Good luck.
Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Alo Verpi, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Alo Verpi, oho. Suukon kirsikka silmät niin mustat kuin yö. Ja ne loisti kuin tuikkiva tähtien työ.